Here's the second video. So we're still in the middle of TV. TV had basically every kind of show you wanted to see. You had westerns. You have the news, dramas. You would have comedy shows, quiz shows, game shows. So just like TV is now, pretty much the same way it was back then, it had all kinds of variety of stuff with westerns and news and sitcoms and sports and kid shows and variety shows and quiz shows, all kinds of stuff. A lot of folks refer to this as the golden age of TV because it presented a very idealized version of America. So a lot of folks always talk about these shows like I Love Lucy or Leave It to Beaver or can't think of the family's name. There's another show, I can't think of their names. But not Brady Bunch, it's later on. But anyway, so point is, it's always these idealized versions of the family. Like you have the dad who works, mom's at home doing cooking and cleaning. There's like two kids. They go out and play every day. They go to school and they get into shenanigans, but it's never real problems. And so that's the criticism of 1950s TV. It was very wholesome and very idealistic, but they never dealt with like real world issues. They don't deal with like crime. Like on TV shows, there's never any crime or anything. Or like, what if little Jimmy, uses bad language or uses, gets in a fight, just kind of like, it's all very like easy to resolve conflicts that you can resolve in 20 minutes on a TV show that are not realistic. Like, this is the prime time of like civil rights movement. Civil rights has happened in the 50s. How much did TV shows address that back then? None at all, right? Violence or killings or those kind of things, none of that's really addressed. Like, even on cop shows, like, they didn't address that kind of stuff. So, like, it's all very tame. It's all stuff that can be basically determined within, like, an hour show or a half-hour show, and that's it. So you want to have that down, because this is the kind of question you would see on a test. The question you would see on a test is basically, you're going to see a lot of idealized versions of society back then, and also you mainly see what kind of race mostly? White, okay? So the majority of television in the 1950s is mostly white. You see very low minorities. You also see low numbers of women. So this is us getting into stereotypes. So they try to portray a stereotypical family as what they thought. Like they try to present like dad as the worker, mom as the stay-at-home housewife, those kind of things. But men were on TV in a 3-to-1 ratio to women. So you saw way more men on television than you saw women. So in a 3-to-1 ratio, you saw men on television, way more. So men will dominate. Women usually are in this subservient role as a housewife. Very few African Americans or Latinos are shown. If an African American did show up on a television show, what would they usually be doing in that show? Working, or some kind of like service role, like milkman or mailman or something like that, right? So it's never, you don't have a show of just about what in the 50s, essentially. Or showcasing what in the 50s. Yeah, diversity, or like a black family or Latino family. Like one of the rare exceptions was I Love Lucy. I Love Lucy was about this white comedian and her husband. Her real life husband was her husband on the show too, who was Cuban. So like he was Latino, but it's mostly because of who they were in show business and who she was that he got to have a starring role in the show. But most shows, it was like a white mom and dad and a white kids, and that's it, right? Nothing addressing real world issues at all. So TV omitted poverty, it omitted diversity, it omitted temporary conflicts and civil rights. That's the kind of thing you want to be aware of. That's the kind of question we're going to have on the test next week, is being aware of like TV lacking diversity and poverty and conflicts of the time. Obviously, also the way that TV shows are promotes what theme of the 50s too. What's our big theme of the 50s? Conformity, right? So 1950s television does promote a lot of conformity as well in this time period, okay? All right, so is everybody good with TV? Yes? Okay. All right, looking now at the beat movement. So we've emphasized a lot of conformity in this time period. There were some people who wanted to break away from that conformity, and they're referred to as the Beat Generation or Beatniks. If you're a part of the Beat Generation or Beatniks, you are trying to be anti-conformists. These are not hippies. So if you need to write that down, write that down. They're not hippies. Hippies come in the next decade, in the 60s. They're similar, but they're not the same. So while beatniks or people who follow the beat movement are conformist, anti-society, they're not hippies like we're going to see later in the 60s. There's a distinction. All right, so beatniks were writers and artists who criticized American society. The leaders of the beatnik movement were writers and artists who criticized society. They refused to conform to the ways everybody dressed and thought and spoke and acted. So they refused to conform to the ways that everybody dressed and thought and acted. So they're basically trying to be nonconformists. They're trying to be individuals when society from all angles was pushing conformity, right? I have a few pictures here of like people who kind of dressed back then and they kind of dressed how they wanted. They may grow their hair longer, not wear suits and stuff. Because like every like guy would wear like the same kind of stuff, like a t-shirt or like a button-up shirt, jeans, sneakers, short haircut. Girls would wear dresses. Like it was girls didn't not wear dresses back then. Like all girls like all the time wore dresses constantly, right? Or girls didn't just go around in a t-shirt or like in a pair of slacks, whatever. It was girls wearing dresses, guys were like in jeans and a shirt. So it was all very everybody kind of dressed and wore the same stuff. Men and women the same kind of thing. So they wanted people to kind of dress and think their own way and act their own way. But it's kind of funny because by being a nonconformist, you're also kind of doing what? You and your little posse are kind of doing what? You're kind of all doing what together, though? If you're being a nonconformist in society, you're all kind of wearing what? The same thing, being nonconformist. So in a way, you're also kind of being what? A conformist to your own subgroup, right? So they try to not wear the mainstream stuff, but they still kind of wore the same stuff. That happens now, right? If you're like trying to not wear what everybody else wears, usually you're not out there wearing something that no one else is wearing. You see what I'm saying? Right? If you're trying to wear a unique look, it doesn't mean that you're the only person wearing that unique look, typically. Most people aren't out there like wearing completely random stuff. It usually matches in some kind of form of fashion. So anyway, there's a famous writer from this era who's a beatnik, this guy right here, a guy named Jack Kerouac. That's right. Yeah, so Kerouac, Jack Kerouac, this is the guy right here. He wrote a book called On the Road. This book, On the Road, was big for nonconformists, people who were beatniks. Basically, after World War II, everybody was expected to do what with their lives? You go to high school, then what? What? Maybe go to college, or at least get a job, right? And then do what? Start a family, and then you have your family, and then you live and you die, and that's it, right? So many Americans, like, they thought, like, I'm just going to go out of high school, get a job, or go to college, get a long-term career, get married, have kids, die, that's it, right? Everybody kind of did the same thing. So in his book On the Road, he challenges that notion and says, I don't know what I want to do in my life right out of high school. I don't know what I want to do in my life. Right. I don't know what I want to do in my life after high school. I don't have it all planned out. So what he does is he goes where? On the road, right? He gets like on a motorcycle and just starts driving. Like just basically drives the country, kind of explores the country and just kind of learns about himself and about life out there. And that's what he does, right? But is that what most people do nowadays? What are you going to do after high school? Probably go to college or probably get a job and just go right to work, right? And that's kind of his point. Are you doing the exact same thing everybody else is doing? Or are you going to try to be individual or unique, right? Try to go out there and do something different. That's kind of his point, right? And that's what his theme is there in general. So what you want to have down is that, like, the Beat generation is a version or a form of what for the time? Anti-conformity or rebellion. So I would have that written down. So the Beat movement or the Beatniks, the way they dressed, the way they behaved was anti-conformist. It was rebellious. It was an act of rebellion. Then you have our second act of rebellion. Also, too, who do you think were usually beatniks? What age? Or younger kids, right? So younger kids would be the ones who'd be beatniks. All right, rock and roll is next. So rock and roll is also a version of rebellion. So you want to put that down too. Rock and roll itself is also a version of rebellion. So rock and roll is also a version of rebellion too. So rock and roll is also a version of rebellion as well. So rock and roll is a uniquely American version of music. You're taking aspects of African American culture and aspects of white American culture, mixing them together to make rock and roll. You're taking rhythm and blues traditions, like you take some of those beats and sounds from rhythm and blues from African Americans, and you're mixing it in with electric guitars and electric instruments. So you're taking like African American rhythm and blues, and like you're mixing it with electric instruments. So like the electric guitar or the electric bass are instruments that get used now in rock and roll. And so kind of like jazz was a unique version of American music, now you have rock and roll, which also becomes a unique version of American music. It starts off a lot of ways in like black communities and some white, but what artists become popular first? If a lot of this music is coming out of black communities, what artists become popular nationally first? Not black artists. A lot of it's white artists. And that's become my point, right? That a lot of radio stations and these people would not necessarily play black artists, so the people who got famous first were usually what? Whites, right? So a lot of white artists like Bill Haley in the comments, Elvis Presley, they got famous first before some of these other African American artists got famous in that same time. Obviously, there's also a lot of issues here with like segregation, race, like in the South, those places too. Like if you had white artists playing rock and roll in the South, that's one thing, but a lot of times the black artists may not be able to play in the South, or even if they played in the South, there'd be segregation in the audience they had. They had like an all-white dance floor, like up in the balcony would be the African Americans. So like you have a lot of racism that still goes on with all this, even though the music itself is inherently very infused by what culture? African American, right? So